I don't live much of an exciting life, but whenever people ask me for a scary story, this is the one I tell. It happened during my senior year of high school, back when I lived in a small coastal town. The kind of place that's bustling with tourists in the summer, but feels like a ghost town once the season ends. My family's house was just a few blocks from the beach, close enough that I could hear the waves crashing at night if the wind was right. I spent most of my evenings out on the boardwalk, either jogging or just wandering, trying to clear my head. It was my escape, my way of dealing with the stress of school and everything else. But that all changed one night, a night I'll never forget. It was around midnight and the town was dead silent. The boardwalk was empty, the shops all closed up, and the only light came from the occasional flickering street lamp. I didn't bring my phone. I never did on these walks. I liked the solitude, the feeling of being completely alone with my thoughts. But that night the solitude felt different, heavier, like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I was about halfway down the boardwalk when I first noticed it, a faint sound, like someone dragging their feet across the wooden planks. I stopped and turned around, but there was no one there. Just the long stretch of empty boardwalk behind me, disappearing into the darkness. I shook it off, telling myself it was just the wind or maybe the sound of the ocean echoing strangely. But as I kept walking, the sound came back. This time it was closer. I spun around again, my heart starting to race. Still nothing. The boardwalk was empty, but the sound was unmistakable now. Slow, deliberate footsteps, like someone was following me but staying just out of sight. I picked up my pace, trying to shake the feeling that I was being watched. The footsteps matched mine, step for step. I stopped abruptly, and the sound stopped too. My stomach churned as I realized whoever, or whatever, was following me was playing a game. I started walking again, faster this time, and the footsteps sped up with me. I could feel my pulse in my throat, my breath coming in short, panicked bursts. I glanced over my shoulder, and that's when I saw him. A man standing at the edge of the boardwalk where the light from the street lamp didn't quite reach. He was tall with a hood pulled low over his face, and he was just standing there, watching me. I couldn't see his eyes, but I could feel them on me, cold and unblinking. I broke into a run, my sneakers slapping against the wood as I sprinted toward the end of the boardwalk. My car was parked just a few blocks away, and all I could think about was getting to it and locking the doors. But no matter how fast I ran, I could still hear the footsteps behind me, steady and relentless. I didn't dare look back. I just ran, my lungs burning, my legs screaming in protest. When I finally reached my car, I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the door open. I threw myself inside and slammed the door shut, locking it with a loud click. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, trying to catch my breath. That's when I saw him again. He was standing at the edge of the parking lot, just outside the circle of light from the street lamp. He hadn't moved, hadn't chased me. He was just standing there, watching. I started the car and peeled out of the parking lot, my tires screeching against the pavement. I didn't look back. I drove straight home, my mind racing with questions I couldn't answer. Who was he? Why was he following me? And why hadn't he tried to catch me? The next morning, I told my parents what had happened. They were concerned, of course, but they chalked it up to some drunk tourist or a local creep trying to scare me. They insisted I stop walking alone at night, and I agreed. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. A few days later, I was cleaning out my car when I found something tucked under the passenger seat. It was a small, crumpled piece of paper. I unfolded it, my hands trembling, and saw a single sentence scrawled in messy handwriting. "I know where you live." I froze, my blood turning to ice. How had it gotten there? I hadn't left my car unlocked, and there was no way someone could have slipped it in without me noticing. I crumpled the paper and threw it away, trying to convince myself it was just a prank. But the words stuck with me, gnawing at the back of my mind. A week later, I was sitting in my room when I heard a noise outside. It was late, and the house was quiet, so the sound stood out like a gunshot. I crept to the window and peered out into the darkness. At first, I didn't see anything. Then movement caught my eye. There, at the edge of our driveway, was the same figure from the boardwalk. The hooded man. He was just standing there, staring up at the house, at my window. I ducked down, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I stayed there for what felt like hours, too scared to move. When I finally worked up the courage to look again, he was gone. But the feeling of being watched lingered, like a shadow I couldn't shake. The next day I told my parents everything. The note, the man outside the house. This time they took it seriously. They called the police, who came and took a report. They even patrolled the area for a few nights, but they never found anything. No one matching the description, no suspicious activity. It was like he had vanished into thin air. For weeks I lived in constant fear. I stopped going out at night altogether, and I double-checked every lock in the house before bed. But nothing else happened. No more notes, no more sightings. Life slowly returned to normal, and I started to convince myself it was all in my head. Maybe it had just been a series of coincidences, my imagination running wild. But then, one night, I woke up to the sound of my bedroom door creaking open. I sat up, my heart in my throat, and saw a shadowy figure standing in the doorway. The hooded man. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just stood there watching me. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I wanted to run, but my body wouldn't obey. We stayed like that for what felt like an eternity, locked in a silent, terrifying standoff. And then, just as suddenly as he appeared, he was gone. The door closed softly behind him, and I was alone again. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I didn't even move. I just sat there, staring at the door, waiting for it to happen again. It's been years since that night, and I've never seen him again. But I still think about him, especially when I'm alone in the dark. I wonder who he was, what he wanted, and why he chose me. And I wonder if he's still out there, watching, waiting for the next time I let my guard down.